All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. The financial world was on edge throughout most of the day, awaiting the word from the Fed. Ben Bernanke, chair of the FDIC, also chairman of Fifth Third Bank Corporation, and author of Senseless Panic. And I got to admit that I've panicked senselessly in the past myself. Welcome. Thanks for coming in, sir. Appreciate it.
It's good to be here, Steve.
All right, so the Ben Bernanke announced that the tapering, the much ballyhooed and feared in many respects tapering, will start in January, but it's going to be from $85 billion down to $75 billion per month of QE.
That's my understanding. And I don't know how much she's promised in terms of beyond January. I think he's left that open. For
Janet Yellen, possibly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all right, so talk about what this means. I guess the market interpreted it as, good and bad. I mean, lots of people on Wall Street have said, we need a tapering. We need to get rid of QE, whatever. Of course, if that happened, many people feared that the market would go way down. But here they got, okay, this satisfies almost everybody. It satisfies those who say there has to be something done to lessen it. It was a very slight lessening. And for the foreseeable future, that's where it's going to stay. He said interest rates will remain at record lows. So I guess it's the best possible result that the market could have hoped for today, correct?
I think the market really, most people expected the tapering to begin soon, and they expected it to be gradual, and I think that's what he has done. He started the tapering soon, and it will be gradual. I'm not a fan of QE3. I believe the Fed did a good job in trying to contain the crisis in 2008, 2009 by pumping a lot of money in, but I feel that QE3 has done more harm than good. In fact, maybe no good and only harm. I think it's distorting the markets. It's retarding the economic recovery, in my view, and making it very hard for smaller businesses and consumers to get money as opposed to big corporations. So I really am happy to see this being unwound. I wish it had been sooner. I wish it had never come into place. I think we'd be further ahead in the economic recovery had they not done this QE3. But that said, it was there, and a lot of people feared its removal, and so I think Chairman Bernanke is doing what he thinks is the best thing in terms of gradually getting rid of it.
And do you agree with that as someone who doesn't favor QE? Do you and wants to see it unwound? Do you agree with the slight $10 billion per month decrease?
I really don't have any problem with it being gradually unwound, if that makes people feel better. But I really think the sooner we get rid of it, the better we're going to be. We got to let the market start operating again. I don't know how to trust markets anymore with the Fed being so dominant in them. It's time to get back to a market economy and not have the Federal Reserve having a $3 and $4 trillion balance sheet.
How does it make it more difficult? As a layman, I'm thinking, okay, interest rates are at record lows. Small businesses need loans to get the business started, to buy equipment, et cetera. So they're getting, if I'm reading it right, low interest rates. And why is it harder for them to get the money they need for their businesses then, as you said?
Well, the credit standards have gone up, and there are the big corporations don't even need to go to banks. They can go out into the marketplace and raise money through bonds, and bond rates are at record lows. But in the banking system, when the rates are so low, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to take a lot of risk at this stage and go out and make loans to higher risk loans. None of the banks are doing that. At the same time, we have capital requirements going up significantly in the larger banks, and so they're looking at their balance sheets and saying, well, wait a minute, why we got to get rid of assets, not make new loans. Right. I think that the regulatory policies, the fiscal policies, and the monetary policies over the past 3 or 4 years have made the recovery much more difficult than it needs to be.
Do you believe that, and there's been so much talk, especially today, it being Bernanke's last appearance before the press as Fed chair, do you believe that this was something that was needed in the first place and just went on too long? Do you believe Bernanke saved us from a Great Depression with his monetary policies, or not?
I think what they did in 2008, 2009 had to be done. I think it has gone on way too long. I also believe that the crisis, and that's really the topic of my book, Senseless Panic, right. I believe that the crisis was really bungled by the government and turned what should have been a correction in the housing markets and other markets that needed correction. It turned it into a panic, a worldwide financial panic, and it didn't need to be that way. Economic conditions and conditions within the banking system were far worse in 1980-81 than they were in 2007, 8, and 9. Far worse. And we handled some 3,000 bank and thrift failures, including many of the largest banks in the country in that earlier period, the 1980s, versus 400 this time around. So I really think that the mishandling of the crisis is what created the severe panic. I believe that the Fed kept it from trailing off into perhaps a depression. They needed to do that. I'm glad they did that. I salute them for doing that. But enough already.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, they're listening now. Bill Isaac, Senior Managing Director of FTI Consulting, former Chair of the FDIC, Chairman of Fifth Third Bank Corporation, and author of Senseless Panic. I want to ask you, before we get more to the book, I want to ask you about Janet Yellen. Were you happy with her selection? And, you know, the markets, I recall, when she was confirmed were, and, you know, because they felt she would continue QE. Now that she's standing next to Bernanke as his successor, as he lessens it, do you have any feeling, if not direct knowledge, of course, as to what she might do when she gets into that position?
I clearly don't have any direct knowledge.
Right.
I believe that she is highly qualified for the position. How she reacts on the monetary policy front and how she reacts on the regulatory front, because these are both very important fronts. How we regulate the banks and how much we raise capital and liquidity requirements and what kind of burdens we put on them as they go forward. Those are very important to the economy, as is monetary policy, as is fiscal policy. I don't know how to predict what she's going to be doing. My guess is she's going to take a greater personal interest in bank and bank holding company regulatory policy than Chairman Bernanke has. I think she sort of signaled that, and she was a regulator when she was president of the San Francisco
Fed. Right, I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
And so I think she's going to take a stronger role in regulatory policy. I look forward to seeing how she handles it.
And what would you like to, as a man in your position, what would you like to see her do, but that you feel would make it easier for banks to give loans and benefit the economy, in your view?
Well, that's a very complicated question, but one thing I would say is that we have imposed on the banking system enormous regulatory burdens through Dodd-Frank, the Financial Reform Act, which is, I think, a very poor regulatory reform that was driven by embarrassment that they gave away all that taxpayer money under TARP. And the Congress said, we've got to make it right, so let's dump Dodd-Frank on the banking system. The time our bank regulatory system right now is highly pro-cyclical, and by that I mean when the regulators really ought to be acting contrary to what's going on in the banking system to try to help alleviate booms and busts.
Right.
And so the time to be raising bank capital and requiring more reserves and slower growth and higher credit standards would have been in 2004 and 2005, 2006. And we didn't do that. We have a whole bunch of regulatory and accounting rules in place that encouraged the banks to grow faster and not to raise their capital and their reserves during that
wrong time. Yeah.
And now we're in this down period in 2008, 2009, 2010, and we're dumping all these burdens on the bank, raising capital standards, raising liquidity standards,
the other way.
All of which I favor, but in a better time.
Right.
I think that we've got to make our bank regulatory and our accounting system much more counter-cyclical than we are right now.
When you wrote A Senseless Panic, how do you, I mean, it might have been more of a broad, generalized title and geared towards more of an industry audience, but how do you stop the public? How do you stop the average investor who isn't a millionaire, who is saving for their 401k or has their money in a 529? How do you get them to stop listening to all these things which could drive you crazy and panicking senselessly and pulling out at the wrong time and then trying to get in again at the wrong time? How do you stop that?
Well, by having counter-cyclical policies, and when you're in trouble in the financial system, when you've got a lot of economic problems and financial problems, and as we did in 1980 and 1981, we had the prime rate go from 7 or 8% to 21.5%.
Amazing.
How can a bank, an individual, a business, a farmer react to that kind of interest rate? They didn't plan on that, and so it drove bankruptcies all over the country. The agricultural depression, energy market collapse, a real estate depression, and so forth. And what you have to do when you're in a period like that is take strong actions to say, we're in charge, we know what we're doing, we're going to handle these failures and this situation in a way that is stabilizing, not destabilizing. And that's what they didn't do in 2008, 2009, which is why I wrote the book.
Right. When the economy, we see the jobs numbers, and there's so much to read into them, if you could even believe them, after the admission that right before the election they were doctored. So I don't even know what to make of them anymore. Well, that might be a good question to ask you, if you have faith in those statistics when they come out on a monthly basis now. But we're seeing the numbers come down. But you look at the inside, and there are discouraging numbers in there as for reasons why the numbers are coming down. And you look at the latest poll. The latest poll from ABC News yesterday showed that more people favor Republicans to handle the economy than President Obama. Mm-hmm. And you could argue that it's been 5 years of pretty failed policy. At least that's how most Americans might see it. Where do you think he has taken, regulations included, but regulations, if you will, aside, where has he taken this economy? Do you believe it's heading under his direction? And is there reason for a hope of a turnaround?
I believe that people are scared, nervous, and they don't have a lot of confidence to make investment decisions, whether it's to go out and buy a new car, a new house, new appliances, or to start a new business, or to expand your factory. People do not have the confidence in our government right now that they need. I don't believe that President Obama is solely responsible for that by any means, but we've got fiscal policy wrong. We're frightened of the trillion-dollar deficits and growing. Nobody seems to be able to get them under control, and we're scared about a monetary policy that says we're going to have 0% interest rates because the economy is so horrible, we can't raise the rates.
And a debt ceiling coming, or another raise coming in a month. Yeah.
And we're also very nervous about the banking system, the financial system, and what it's doing. So I believe that we have failed fiscal, monetary, and regulatory policies, and that we haven't corrected them, and we've been spending all of our time arguing about things like health care instead of let's get everybody back to work again.
Bill Isaac, a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much for coming up. Bill Isaac, of course. The book, by the way, again, Shameless Panic, I recommend it to all of you. And Senior Managing Director, FTI Consulting, former chair of the FDIC, and chairman of Fifth Third Banking Corp. Great to meet you, sir. Thank you very much.
Good to be with you.
When we come back, Lieutenant Colonel Rick Francona, ladies and gentlemen, will join us to talk about what the budget does to veteran benefits, and the tragedy in Afghanistan yesterday where we lost 6 soldiers on a Black Hawk Down. Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax TV and radio.